Hey everyone, I'm James Dorado. I lead a data team here at Bilt. We're going to talk to you a little bit about conversational analytics today, a little bit about our journey, and kind of what we've cooked up over here. So the team, myself, Ben on our analytics team, as well as Nick. I've been with Bilt for about 2 years. Nick has been on board for about a year, Ben for about a year and a half. Prior to that, we didn't have whole lot of a data team or a data stack at Bilt, so we've built a lot in quite a short period of time, and we're excited to share kind of the latest evolution on our kind of journey with LLMs. So, so far, I think going back like a couple of years, everyone knows like the ChatGPT moment, right? I think when that came out, it rocked our world. As time progressed, I think people were starting to think about like, well, what can I really use this for? What can I use it for to actually like save time in my like daily workflow? And so, when we at Bilt were kind of messing around with it, we're like, well, there is this possibility of kind of like doing this cool talk to your data thing, right? And that's just an idea. But in around March of 2025, we were tasked with a hackathon at Bilt. So our CEO clearly spent a long weekend with Claude and was convinced that it was the answer to all of the world's problems. No, but in all seriousness, he went deep with AI and realized kind of the power of it. So what he immediately did was he said, hey, we're going to basically take 2 days off of normal work. Everyone drop what they're doing and find ways to, use AI to do your job smarter, better, faster, which is really cool. And, we took this seriously. Like no one did anything except like play with AI, which is really cool. So for the data team, the mandate was really, how do we get this talk to your data thing to actually work? Like we have all this structured data in our BigQuery warehouse. We've invested heavily in dbt. We know all of this great lineage. We've invested in the semantic layer. Why can we not just like talk to an LLM like you would a human analyst and get charts and analysis back, right? So in that 48-hour period, we were able to cook something up that was quite cool. We were able to use an MCP to connect BigQuery to Claude, and as soon as we got that working, like the moment we got it working, I'll never remember like Nick's face. Like he was just like, holy shit, like this is really cool. Like you could see it writing the SQL, you could see it like extending analysis, and that's kind of what really gave us confidence to kind of like invest in this path. So continuing on then, we were like, this is cool, this is a good hackathon, but in terms of like something that we could roll out to the whole company and really use as like a self-serve analytics tool, we were like, well, surely there are companies that are probably building just this product and could probably nail this. Like we have our day jobs, like we have a lot of other stuff to do at Bilt. It's probably not gonna get the love and time and attention to really build a proper product in-house. So we went and tried a long list of vendors, dozens, and we were just consistently underwhelmed. And this is not a bash on any of the companies out there, some of them that are probably in the Discovery Hall right now. But I think what we found was that there were a lot of rigid requirements. It was like, okay, well, redefine your whole semantic layer in our tool. Like, we're not gonna do that. Like, no, we don't have the time to do that. So we're not going to. And when we would trial their tools, we would be like, okay, well, we kind of keep hitting inflexible, barriers where if you really want to do more freewheeling analysis that really replaces a human analyst, that is something that I think a lot of tools are afraid to allow you to do. They want a governed data model and the answer to always be right. For Bilt, I think we're a little bit more, risk tolerant, and we're saying, hey, if the LLM kind of extends an analysis and it's kind of 90% right and we need to prompt it to correct it, like that's okay because we are saving kind of some of that really deep work, not just the simple retrieval, which honestly, for simple retrieval, I think we all know you can still go to probably a well-curated dashboard and get your answer. So we kind of pivoted back to the internal solution, said, okay, let's go back to this MCP and let's give it some more love, and let's see what we can do. And that's where we made the magic happen. So with that, I will hand it off to Ben, who's going to tell you a little bit about our latest setup.
Hey folks, Ben. As it says, right, like where we started was Claude and BigQuery. Where we extended it to was with dbt, and as of literally last week, Sigma, our BI tool, and it truly is magic. But the way in which we got there, we wanted to spend a little bit of time just explaining the structure and the tool set. Everybody familiar with MCPs? Big show of hands. Most? Has anybody made their own or just leveraged existing ones? A few? It's incredibly easy to make your own, surprisingly so. It is YAML. And what you can see up here is the Claude web app. We chose Claude mostly because it was the tool that our CEO loved the most. But we definitely could have built this in ChatGPT or otherwise. As James said, he did spend a weekend with Claude. And it's really easy to connect your own MCPs, leveraging, as you're already OAuth into the Claude web app, leveraging a lot of the other permission sets that you have as a Bilt employee. In those, we create a bunch of different tools. Tools you can think about are basically a small set of instructions that have an action. So you can see here, there's simple tools like query, which means, hey, Claude, use this basic structure to run a SQL query that you create. The dbt MCP has a bunch of built-in tools. If you haven't used the dbt MCP, I highly encourage it, and we'll talk about that more. But those include lineage and documentation and tests, et cetera. And we've also added additional tools that look directly at the Sigma API, our BI tool, to pull in dashboards. So the tool sets really become such a pivotal, basically all of the options that Claude knows it can do to be successful. The other, I would say, really critical part of our Claude setup are our instructions and our context. There are two layers of our context. The first is our system level prompt. Here's an example of our system level prompt. It is not everything, but it is a lot. And what we add into our Claude project is instructions of the personality, who it is. We have played around with adding funny points to this to make our CEO laugh. Say, for example, telling it to act like it's announcing a race in some capacity, and it really leans into any of those instructions. But here, the majority, we wanted to serve as an expert of all things Bilt. We provided a bunch of Bilt documentation. Think like investor presentations, new hire onboarding documents. And then we also specify specifically BigQuery or our data warehouse project instructions. So think like always query this particular data sets or data sets. Focus on popular and heavily used tables. Always read dbt-generated comments and documentation. We've also recently added ability for it to scrape logs of our queries to specifically list most popular joins, most popular where clauses, most popular select statements. This gives it, before it ever starts querying, a really good picture into what it wants to do next. The last piece is bolded, and we really do think this is important. Claude, to me, is like the most overeager first year out of college analyst. Like that's how I think about Claude. And it just left college. It's so good at SQL, and it just needs to keep going and going and going and going and going. We really encourage everybody to tell Claude to slow down, to think. And as many analysts and analytics engineers and data engineers, one of our core assets is our ability to critically think and process before we start working. And getting Claude to do that is difficult, but highly important. Past the system level instructions, we have our project-specific instructions. One of the hardest things to do as a data analyst, right, and Claude, again, as your right out of college data analyst, is to know where to look for tables, what's the context. If it can find the tables, Claude generally speaking, crushes it. If they can't find what tables to use or what data sets to use, it flounders really quickly. With dbt, we've been able to construct really curated model sets in very specific domains, whether that be marketing or our banking division or our travel portal. Within those domains, there's a set of 5, 10, 15 tables that encompass 90 to 95% of analysis. Giving Claude specifically those tables and listing them out directly enables it to be significantly more performant than saying, search through all 500 dbt models before you start your project. If you hit the next slide, here's just an example, right? We specifically say business context. One of our products is a travel portal. And in that travel portal, there's advisors, there's gross booking value, there's all these different metrics. And we are very explicit in stating, use these tables because you're going to be able to answer 90 to 95% of the questions when these questions are asked. The last really key insight that we had is that more MCPs are better. Oftentimes, especially at the start, we were debating, and Claude itself was struggling and saying, hey, it always jump right to the BigQuery MCP before using dbt1. What we found is that interplaying those MCPs and our Sora image generation of dbt hugging BigQuery, the semantic layer is incredibly important. The lineages are incredibly important. And the flexibility that Claude has when it can just query BigQuery directly, also very important. The more MCPs we started adding, the more tools we started including into our Claude project, the better we saw Claude perform. So with that, let's talk about one more thing. I got one more slide for you. Before we get into the live demo, Elias really inspired us that we should do live demos. Hopefully everybody at the keynote saw, he was perfectly successful, so we will be perfectly successful too. But before we get into the live demo, the last reason why we were most excited about Claude, especially in comparison to some of the other tools that James talked about that we demoed, is that it takes our projects and questions a step further. It creates dashboards. It's not a BI tool, something we're pushing for. But it's not a BI tool. They're static, but they're really interactive and provide a really great way to really push our analysts, our business stakeholders, and even our engineers to think about different questions. Claude doesn't just stop when it gets an answer. It wants to think through and come up with new or creative approaches. It doesn't just go to the first level of dimensions. It generally tries to go to a second order dimension as well. And visuals become a really important piece to that at the end of the day. So with that, let's see it with a live demo.
So jumping into the live demo here, I have pre-cooked a project with, as you can see, I've got some memory from my previous discussions with this Claude project, generated some instructions, and I've also attached some business context, which is a Google Doc that our CEO and probably Claude as well generated. But going into here, we can jump in and for our first example, we're going to do something quite simple, like that you've probably seen from many other conversational analytics tools, just asking for a very specific number. So we're going to go, how many users do we have in Las Vegas? And you'll see that we have this configured so that the internet will hopefully work.
Live demos always work.
Here we go. So we've configured, as Ben mentioned, we have MCPs hooked up. For these types of point questions, we've configured it so that it will try and look for metrics in our semantic layer first. Then it will query those metrics, pull the answer, and then it will also use our Sigma MCP to search for dashboards related to that question so that it can suggest deeper dives or further research. For deeper level questions, which I'll get to in the second part, we're more guide the project to work towards just using the BigQuery MCP, where we've seen it have a lot of success with much more creative kind of concepts and just being able to bang, 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 run a bunch of queries, read the results, go back, like change the query, do it again, like, and create those like kind of interactive artifacts that we screenshotted on the other slide. So yeah, we're getting this. These aren't real numbers, by the way. So that's part of it. Our instructions is adding a bit of magic to it. But yeah, you can see we've got some context on the number, some links to dashboards, which we can open in other slides. That'll get us to our sigma. But yeah, going to part 2, we can ask a more vague question like, help me understand transaction trends from the last 60 days. I've even done a spelling error, but I'm sure AI will fix that. And yeah, this could take a minute, particularly with the, actually I can probably just jump into when I last ran this. If the Wi-Fi cooperates. But yeah, in the end, it will run for a while, maybe like 2 to 3 minutes, depending on the speed of your internet connection, and it'll spit out some really like detailed and interesting insights. So when I was running the same question in preparation, it'll spit out things like, we see big peaks during rent day when people are paying their rent, and then there's a tail off over the next few days from like late payments, but then stable engagement throughout the month as we see engagement with our broader neighborhood offering. So yeah, those are the types of things that it can like actually do some real analysis and provide business context to the numbers that it's reading. I feel like we're probably going to give up on this one.
Live demos, they always work. So this half of the presentation, we focused on our analyst experience, both for ourselves as data practitioners, but also we encourage our business users, our CEO and executive team to use this as well. Next half, we're going to talk about how we use AI for ourselves to make our lives easier as DBT practitioners.
Thankfully, this one won't have live demos. So yeah, as Ben mentioned, we also use AI in our workflows. Cursor is our IDE of choice, and we connect that up to our DBT repo, but along with a suite of other MCPs, including the BigQuery. But we also use our the linear MCP, it's all here, the Git CLI, and our DBT repo. So the context behind this kind of workflow is we found that we were like repeatedly investigating warns that were configured on our data quality pipelines. And it was something that we basically went through the same process over and over. And we saw an opportunity for AI to take over some of that work, particularly when it came to resolving accepted values tests. So this is when an engineer from a source database will add a new value to a particular column. It might cause a warn in one of our data pipelines, and all we need to do is just like add it to the list of accepted values. So we've actually written a full MDC file that we can call from within the Cursor IDE, and it'll set off the agent in basically looping through all of the warns that it can see, finding the new accepted values by leveraging the BigQuery MCP, adding it to the YAML, the relevant YAML in the DBT project, and then creating GitHub PRs for review. And then, so that's phase 1 of the workflow. And then phase 2 is looking at all the uniqueness and not null warns. Now, we experimented with getting the agents to resolve those errors, but we found that it was kind of like hacking its way through by basically removing tests or like adding qualifier statements to make them pass and things like that. So we're basically like, look, not null and uniqueness tests, I think that we need like a bit of a deeper look at those. So what we task the agent with is actually analyzing them. So and then creating tickets and separating them by subject area so that we can have an analyst or an analytics engineer have the full context to be able to just directly work on it. So I've taken some screenshots of this workflow where we just call the MDC file from within our cursor. It will then run queries using the BigQuery MCP, find new values, add it to the YAML, commit it to GitHub. You can see that it resolved 15 accepted values tests. It'll summarize its work, put that into a linear ticket, generally with great enthusiasm. And then it will also create tickets where summarizing the analysis that it's done on the uniqueness or not null test. So you can see that it's like, got the model, the failing column, how many failures, the scale, and then it will give you some queries, templates that you can run in your own IDE to, dive deeper. And with that, I'll hand it back over to James.
All right. Yeah, so what did we learn? Well, for one thing, we definitely want to share some data with you, because why not? It's a data conference. This chart here is kind of showing our monthly active users using the tool. And so this is one of those really cool things you get, is like all the query logs from BigQuery about like who's using this tool and like when and how, what questions they're asking. So really interesting. You can see it's grown steadily as we've kind of rolled it out. For context, Bilt only has about 200 full-time employees, so actually having 30 of our business users like in this consistently is like a pretty meaningful chunk. And it's a really good widespread across departments. It's not just us. It really is folks in operations, customer support, executives, and engineers. And so I think we're finding that like everyone really enjoys interacting with it. And one of like our favorite things is like people will hit us up with a data request, and they'll often be like, I already had Claude like work on it and I got it to this point, but I'm just like getting a little hung up, and be like, oh, like it's just this one little tweak. And then they're like, oh, I'll go tell Claude to do that, and I'll like take it across the finish line. So people really enjoy the self-service because it's kind of fun, right? Like the conversational aspect is really engaging. Versus if you tell somebody to go look at a dashboard, I feel like they'll just never really have quite the same level of enthusiasm. But we're kind of making the analysis process fun. So good engagement, but we're hoping to roll it out further and further. As Ben mentioned earlier, it's also available in the web app, right? So we did have some authentication things we had to work through. A lot of what they announced in the keynote today would have made our lives a lot easier. Not gonna lie, our poor data scientist, Sam, who's not here, he had to work through a lot of that, but now it'll be, in fewer clicks, you'd be able to set this up yourself. So good for you all. And we'll migrate over to that, obviously, as DBT rolls it out. But yeah, I think like one of the key things we immediately recognized when we turned this on, without doing any of the cool tips and tricks that we've implemented since, is just that when we connected Claude to BigQuery and we just said, hey, just focus on this data set that is generated by DBT, it immediately was able to nail so many questions, and that's all you had to do. So in that regard, DBT really is acting like a superpower, and I think everyone in this room has obviously already adopted DBT. So to get started, I think the barrier to entry is really low now, which is great. Then you can layer on a lot of the fancier tool calls, the additional context from like a DBT MCP, like an MCP to maybe your BI tool. All that's great, but like out of the box, it works quite well. For comparison, if you were to like just unleash this on your source data, like good luck. It's going to be a nightmare. And so don't do that. Do not let Claude try to figure out all the relationships between all of your tables. That's just not a good use of time. So going to the next slide, what else do we kind of see in the space? What are we thinking about next in our journey? I think like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the tools that we tried, they were really rigid frameworks. And I think like ultimately, depends on your business, right? But that really rigid framework is like, okay, you can put in a ton of groundwork to build a perfect semantic layer and then put this on top, and then it will basically always get the question right. But how valuable is that really, right? Like, how much time are you really saving? And you have to weigh like the accuracy of that end answer with like all the upfront work you're putting to kind of maintain that. And then are you maintaining that kind of semantic layer or whatever it is in multiple tools? If so, how's that going to scale, right? So that's something to think about. I think like ideally it all just works off your warehouse, off your DBT project. And I think, you know, we did not plan this in line with the keynote this morning. That was all news to us, but I do think it's very much in line with how the company's thinking about it, right? Is that you shouldn't need to put in all this extra effort to make your data AI ready. Like DBT should really kind of do all that heavy lifting for you. And then also I'd be remiss if we didn't mention our partners at Sigma. Obviously, they have an embedded AI solution. We've been pushing them on that. We've been partnering with them on that. But they were also gracious enough to say, hey, like, if you want to just plug in, you know, this MCP to your tool, like, go for it, right? I think, like, some vendors would be like, no, don't do that. Like, just use Ask Sigma. But they are super willing partners. Jake at Sigma was like, yeah, this sounds awesome. Like, please play with it, have fun. And so I think it was a good learning for us to be able to say, hey, yes, I can do this analysis here, but also if you're interested in this, like your data team has actually already created a great dashboard. And if you want to go there and learn more, you can. So I think using all those things together, it's been good. This is all obviously in just a few short months, so we see plenty of opportunity to kind of continue growing, but yeah, that's what we've got. So thank you for your time. We're happy to hang around for a few minutes and ask questions. But yeah, that's what we've got. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, you want to go for it?
Yeah, I don't know if we have a mic to pass around.
Just be loud.
Yeah, just speak loudly. The question was, did it actually work? No. Not our fault. Bad Wi-Fi. For reference, the Wi-Fi in the lunch hall significantly stronger than it is in here. So, yeah.
Right on. Thanks for the talk over here.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first half, you talked about the conversational tool that you built for your internal teams. Have you considered making an external chat interface for, if I understand your business, it's a collection of property management companies, and so a tool where these companies could come in and ask questions about their properties that are a part of your reward system?
Yeah, great question. I think the answer is definitely yes, and something that I think our leadership, in particular our CEO, definitely feels strongly about is that he would love to see a world where effectively anything in the app, whether like the B2B app, which is really a portal where property managers can log in, or like the end user app, will have like a chat interface for essentially anything. And so whether that's like you want to book a trip and we have a travel agent for you, or you just want to like learn about your own points earning behavior, but from a property management standpoint, it could just be like, hey, I need to pull this report. Might be a little bit more boring. Something we've definitely thought about. It's probably a little bit more of a ways off, but I think testing these things internally is a great way to kind of gather all that feedback. Back here. Yep. So the question was, how do we evaluate accuracy? So honestly, today it's fairly limited. It's mostly us testing it, giving it tools and instructions where we can kind of reduce the probability that it'll be wrong to something we're comfortable with. In terms of actually like classifying like question answer pairs, it's something that's definitely on our list. Like I mentioned, we have a few data scientists who aren't with us here today. They helped build this entire thing, so huge credit to them. But that is something they're really excited about, to kind of build those classification models offline that can then feed back into it and say, hey, you know, we need to like reduce this error rate. Yep. 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 So the question is around perms and basically user scoping. So yes. So the nice thing about this is all based on that individual user's perms in BigQuery. So you're not riding along on like a service account here. Like you are using your individual. So we can scope perms like really tightly. And in fact, like some users, when they go in there, they'll try to do something and be like, I got permission denied. I'm like, yep, well, that's because you're not allowed to see that data. Whether it's in Claude or not, like you're not allowed to see that data. So, so the scoping is actually nice. And the other thing is with the query log insights, you know exactly who that user is. It's not like obfuscated, like it's just coming from some service account. So yeah. Yeah, that's all just done in BigQuery, and then like when you authenticate to Claude, you're just using that same. Yeah. Yep. Right there. Yeah. Here, Ben, you want to take that?
Yeah. So it's a great question. Before we had our Sigma integration, it was go to Sigma for these type of questions. If you're trying to get a number, Sigma. If you're trying to do analysis, Claude. And you can see here, right, like this is the kind of deep, robust analysis that we were waiting to get before the internet cut out for a bit. But to us, now that we have integrated the Sigma workbook experience, the instructions within the project in particular go through that flow for the business user. So we actually instruct Sigma to, or rather, we actually instruct Claude to say, first try the semantic layer, then go to Sigma dashboards. Finally, if all else fails, start having fun. And I think that flow of kind of trust is really important to get right within the Claude ecosystem, and then it can become a one-stop shop, because otherwise your kind of questions are splintered across various different resources. Yeah, trust. The question was about trust, on both ends, right? Situations where we fail trust, or situations where people are skeptical to begin with. It's a really hard question. We have found that trust within the tool is going to be lower. Like our trust scores in Claude are lower than our trust scores of Sigma dashboards, or just talking and interacting directly with analysts. But we have some level of comfort in that. We know that is the case, and we have shared that externally as well. We push people, especially when they work in Claude, to focus on actions and insights that they're going to take. So it might not be that the number doesn't exactly tie out to the Sigma dashboard, and we have users who do that. But we want people to say, this is, the peaks and the troughs indicate some particular trend, and you can still action on that even if the number is a little bit off. The other point that I'll mention is that Claude it's not a black box. You can see, if you scroll up here, that like every single action it's taking is based in SQL. So for us as analysts, if we are in a situation where we feel like the user isn't trusting the results, we look into the chat, review the SQL, make any corrections we need to, both within the chat, but also in the project instructions, to improve performance the next time. James mentioned this earlier. When we did this back in March, I was confident I had 6 months left on my job. I thought, this is insane. We spent a lot more time as a team, one, in DBT, thinking about documentation, modeling best practices, building out semantic layers, building out additional dashboards, within Sigma. That's the first. And then two, I think we've become way better thought partners. Data people are really, really smart people. They happen to know SQL. That's my particular take. So if you can get these data people in the room and you're not constantly stressed about answering another question, how many users are in Las Vegas and how many users are in Toronto, right? Then you can actually focus on driving the business forward and pushing your teams and your business partners to try cool new things, to run experiments, and to drive the business forward. Philadelphia, best city in the world.
Good question. So the question was on cost, in particular, like token costs and just kind of like spiraling out of control. So when we first turned this on, it was definitely a fear. The reality is it has not panned out that way. And I think a lot of it is that because of the tools and the process we've put in, it can get answers pretty quickly. What you don't want is kind of like this death spiral where it like can't find the answer and like then starts like doing full table scans of like every table in your like database. Like it'll go crazy. But when you give it better instructions, you kind of avoid that inherently. I think the other thing we just tell people to do is like, look, like, you know, when you ask a question, if it's really struggling, like it should stop and ask for help, and you should stop it and interject. Like you shouldn't really be turning this on and like walking away for 4 hours. But that's more of kind of user feedback. I think at scale, I think we can pretty easily put in guardrails that will kind of prevent those situations. The other thing is just that the context window is just only so large, and so we do find users that hit the context window still, and that's kind of a natural limiter. But it hasn't been a concern at all, so we haven't really felt the need to put in guardrails, but I think we know exactly what some of those are when we kind of get to that point. No, we don't. No. Great question. How repeatable are the answers? So, you know, here's the thing with Gen AI, no two answers are the same. I mean, honestly, with this solution, a lot of the time they are because it knows it gets the right table, it knows the query. I think that's one of the bigger challenges that we've seen is you need to, you know, be okay with that there might be drift from question, from answer to answer. One nice thing is now that Claude has memory, I have played around with that pretty extensively, and if you can kind of inject prompts to say, hey, remember when you did this other analysis, can you basically just reboot it and refresh it? It'll do a really good job of that. So that is obviously a very new feature. So I haven't played with it extensively, and it's not like baked in, but that's one quick hack to kind of unlock that.
Don't fire your analysts. Don't cancel your BI tool contract. It is not going to be your BI tool. There are some really cool vendors that are trying to essentially push that framework of leverage AI in the initial conversation and build a dashboard that you could schedule or repeat. We definitely want to see tools and vendors push in that particular area, because what we often see is the marketing person who's in charge of Las Vegas asks the question, how many users are in Las Vegas, and then wants to just click refresh, and it has to go through the whole process again. And it's something, I think this is one of the areas where we see this particular project lack a lot of success. I think we got one more. Oh my God, there's all four of you. All say your questions at the exact same time, and then we'll answer.
Hi. Yeah, no, just wanted to thank you for this presentation. Really cool to see all the use cases that we have for using an MCP server. I've heard of things like bidirectional, integration between like a CRM and a docs repository. So really cool to see more of them. And also thank you for the shout out. We're Team Sigma here, so we appreciate it. Question for you in terms of just governance of these queries, right? Because you can have one person querying like rent trends for in Las Vegas one day, another person comes in the next day is interested in the exact same question. How do you think about org level context where you might have the exact same queries again and again? You don't necessarily want to run against the cloud data warehouse and query the same question again. So have you thought of governance of those queries?
It's a really good question. As James mentioned, the query logs and the users who are running those queries are exposed, and we review that. We have an entire Sigma dashboard, shout out Sigma, that looks at those particular queries, types of questions we're answering. And one of the things that we're looking to do is leverage Claude to read through those logs, to understand common use cases and patterns that push us into the BI tool. Like we said, BI still remains important, and it's those repeatable situations that we want to be able to push back into BI so that there's a simple place that people can go rather than having to go back and answer the same question again. All right, I think we're getting kicked out. But we'll hang here. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.